Everyone deserves their moment to shine on stage. That's the philosophy of a group on the Mid-North Coast. The inclusive program offers regional performers living with a disability their big break.
Since the onset of his disability, Vincent Walters has ensured music has remained a big part of his life.
The only respite I got from my symptoms, which were all-consuming and horrible, was to pick up my guitar and sing.
An inclusive regional arts program is now giving artists a chance on the main stage.
It's given me an opportunity where I may not have had one.
The Warhope Regional Arts Program pairs artists with disabilities and professionals, building their confidence and skills so they can participate in the mainstream industry.
I love it, and my parents love it too.
Singing or performing as a group is such a therapeutic thing.
The group performed on stage at a regional arts festival called Art Walk. Visual artist Kerry Keynes is also a member of the program.
They teach you some skills that you can then show the world.
Her work was displayed at a local gallery.
Just because you've got a disability doesn't mean that your abilities can't be shown as well.
Support workers say they can see the difference it's made to these artists' lives, giving them an opportunity to showcase their passions.
And that's what he's thinking about.
It's all been made possible by an NDIS grant.
In the smaller regional areas, we're a little bit behind, so it's good that we have got this funding.
The main aim is inclusion.
You don't have to have the best or be the best in something. You can still participate and have a great time and be happy.
It's an inspiring message for all. Madeline Cross, ABC News, Port Macquarie.
The nation is mourning the loss of one of its greatest storytellers, singer-songwriter Archie Roach. He was 66. The Indigenous artist is being remembered as the voice for the stolen generations, a source of healing and unity. The Garma Festival in Arnhem Land is tonight planning a moment's silence in his honour. First Nations leaders there say he's left a profound legacy.
This story's right, this story's true.
Archie Roach spoke to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in a way few others could, of pain, of love, of survival. His songs told his own story, one shared by many others. Taken from his parents when he was just a child, Uncle Archie's best-known song became a searing anthem.
He took the words that we could not speak and he turned them into song so that our voices could be heard.
In his early years, he lived on the streets and struggled with alcoholism as he grappled with his trauma.
I always thought that I wanted to die, just go up somewhere and die, and even tried to take my own life a couple of times because I couldn't see a way out.
As a teenager, he met Ruby Hunter, a fellow singer and Stolen Generations survivor who would become the love of his life. Together, they penned songs that became a soundtrack for Indigenous Australia. The families of both Archie and Ruby have given permission for their names and images to be used to preserve their legacy. The Gunditj, Murra and Bundjalung man said his art was built on pain, but driven by hope.
Doesn't matter how your history's been good or bad or sad things in your history, you've got to tell it all, you know. And it has a way of helping to ease the pain.
If we can be just a little bit more like Archie, then Australia is going to be the kinder, more resilient place, more emotionally mature country that we want it to be.
When Ruby Hunter died suddenly of a heart attack in 2010, Uncle Archie found solace in the recording studio.
That was the best way for me to channel my grief.
His own health had suffered in recent years, but he continued to perform, especially for Aboriginal audiences.
I'm not being forced to do this because of my health. In fact, I'm actually arguing with people and saying, no, I want to do this.
News of Uncle Archie's passing rippled through the crowd here at Garma Festival last night. And as people here process their collective grief, one thing is clear. Archie Roach has left a profound legacy.
You know, I sent a message back home to my cousins saying the respect and acknowledgement and tributes that have been here, you know, everyone is sending you love and strength.
Survived by his two sons, his family paid tribute to the man they describe as a unifying force.
And now, you know, he's dreaming with Aruba and Auntie Ruby and his mum and dad, you know, who he longed for. Yeah.
Uncle Archie once said that songs outlive people, and there's no doubt his will endure, a precious gift to the nation.
I can't bear.
Now that the Prime Minister has promised a referendum on an Indigenous voice to Parliament, the debate begins. When will the referendum be held, and how will it change the lives of First Nations people? At the Garma Festival in northeast Arnhem Land, there's a rich diversity of views, and many people would prefer the discussion focused on a treaty. Here's Indigenous Affairs editor Bridget Brennan.
This dusty centre stage in northeast Arnhem Land is where the clans of the Yolngu share the stories they've held for centuries. The power and the joy of this ceremony is what the Garma Festival is all about. Alongside the dance at the campfire, there's a debate beginning here that could define a nation.
I don't need any more tears or, you know, broken promises. We just need leadership to stand up.
When a referendum is called, Australians will decide whether Indigenous people should be given a permanent advisory body known as a voice. The Prime Minister knows the stakes are high.
There is a risk here, but there's a risk of not advancing as well. I've taken a step forward because the danger was that the process stalled.
Indigenous leader Miles Richardson has come to Arnhem Land from the Haida Nation in Canada. In his experience, constitutional reform means little if governments don't commit to listening and handing over control.
In Canada, we have constitutional provisions beautifully recognizing and authorizing Indigenous rights, Aboriginal rights. In terms of title and ownership, they haven't amounted to a hill of beans because they're denied at the political level.
The draft referendum question was released here in Gulkula in northeast Arnhem Land, and now naturally Australians will have questions about when a vote will be held and what a voice to Parliament could look like. But what the Yolngu people here say is it's also a treaty that's decades overdue.
People have been waiting for and expecting treaty for a long time.
The Minister for Indigenous Australians is adamant a National Treaty and Truth-Telling Commission will happen.
It's not about apportioning guilt. It's not about blame. It's about that we all can share in the whole story of this country.
Rewriting a new chapter and a new era for Australia's first people. Bridget Brennan, ABC News, Gulkula.
A report's found a prisoner rehabilitation program introduced at 7 New South Wales jails, including the Shortland Correctional Centre at Cessnock, appears to have had little effect in preventing reoffending. Joanna Woodburn explains.
Corrective Services New South Wales created the High Intensity Program Unit in 2017 to provide behaviour change training to inmates who were imprisoned for less than 12 months. It covered topics like parenting while in jail and Aboriginal culture. Now, the state's Crime Statistics Bureau has published a study into its effectiveness, finding there was no evidence among participants of a reduction in reoffending or re-imprisonment in the first year after release from custody. It says while there are lower reoffending rates for those who finish the programme, the gap is small and can be confused by the possibility that high-risk individuals are less likely to be enrolled.
Now, through the lockdowns of the last few years, we all spent more time at home, probably more than ever before. Working from home, school from home, social catch-ups even online. Not easy, even with safe and secure housing. And for those without somewhere safe to live, it was an incredibly difficult time. Mission Australia has surveyed teenagers across the country to find out how much of a problem this has been for them. Nada Nasser is the New South Wales State Director for Mission Australia and joins you now. Hi, Nada.
Good morning, Dan. Good to be with you.
This report is specifically looking into first-time homelessness in our state. What did you find?
Yes, Dan, we conduct a survey every year for young people, looking at their aspirations, their values, concerns, well-being. And we also include some questions around housing and to understand also their housing and homelessness circumstances. So this report we released today focuses on their experience of first-time homelessness. And the report showed that 21 in 20 young people between the age of 15 and 19 who responded to our survey were homeless for the first time during the pandemic. Now, this is worrying, obviously, and it's even more worrying because we are seeing a significant increase since 2017, when 1 in 25 young people had recently been pushed into first-time homelessness. So the report also showed that this particular group of young people who were experiencing first-time homelessness were also more likely to have high levels of psychological distress, negative impacts on their well-being, more likely to experience family conflict, more likely to experience discrimination, as well as a number of other pressures.
You said during the pandemic. Is there any reason to think that this happened because of the pandemic?
Well, obviously the pandemic would have had a factor in this, but at the same time, as you said in your introduction, home was a very important. We all appreciated home more during the pandemic because having a safe place to isolate when we all were in lockdown and keeping social distance. So for young people to have been experiencing homelessness during this time was even more worrying, because while we were enjoying the safety of our own homes, there are many young people and many other people out there without that safety net.
When it comes to dealing with homelessness, we often hear increasing the housing supply is a big part of what's needed, and governments are being asked to do that all the time. More affordable housing doesn't seem like a solution, though, for teenagers in this instance. They're not in the market to rent. What do we need to do to help teenagers who are homeless?
Well, it is part of the solution, housing, absolutely a very important part of the solution. But we need housing that is affordable for young people and that is suited, because many young people need support as well as housing. So we need housing that combines access to support as well as housing, and that is designed to be suited for young people. So, we're really delighted to see that the federal government has committed to a national housing and homelessness plan. We want to make sure that that also addresses the needs of homeless young people and that it is adequately funded. But in addition to housing, we also need prevention, early intervention. So we need to really be able to have mechanisms in our system to pick up when people are at risk of homelessness so that we can prevent their homelessness to start with. Things like, for example, having really good screening within schools so that the school community can identify when there's a young person who is couch surfing or has run away from home, or there's a family conflict that is pushing them potentially into homelessness. So that prevention, early intervention is really important. We also then need, once young people become homeless, we need really good support systems within homelessness services that are often under-resourced to make sure that they are well-resourced to be able to support young people to quickly move out of homelessness.
And what you do at Mission Australia is exactly that. So thank you for what you do in our community and for talking to me about this survey today, Nada. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Dan. Good to be with you.
You too. Nada Nasser there, the State Director for Mission Australia.
The state and federal ministers responsible for women's safety are meeting face-to-face for the first time under the Albanese government, hoping to get closer to finalising a 10-year plan to end violence against women and children. Advocates say the draft plan, released before the federal election, is vague and has no meaningful targets. And while the Albanese government's been consulting on possible updates, one of the biggest changes that advocates are calling for is a commitment to spend billions on social housing so people fleeing violence have somewhere to go. Isabel Rowe reports.
Tali Starr left a violent relationship with nothing, not much money and nowhere to live. So trying to start again was almost impossible.
I couldn't find rental properties that I could afford, and so
I would end up in a rental property. The landlord would put the rent up an exorbitant amount of money, and then I would have to find a new place to live. There wasn't places that were affordable, so I ended up homeless.
Tali Starr now works as an advocate for other women escaping violence. 1 in 6 Australian women have been affected.
If we're going to say to women, we want you to be safe, you can escape domestic and family violence, then we need to have somewhere for them to go.
She's one of many advocates who want social housing at the forefront of a discussion at a meeting of women's safety ministers in Adelaide today. A 75-page draft released under the Morrison government has been criticised for being rushed and vague. The plan makes a series of commitments for the next 10 years, including ensuring women have transitional and long-term housing options. Housing advocate Kate Colvin from Everybody's Home says it's a vital part of the response to domestic violence.
At least 45,000 women never actually leave because they, can't afford to. They know they won't be able to afford housing or they don't have housing to go to. And, more than 7,000 women do leave but then return to perpetrators because they find themselves in a situation where they're going to be homeless.
Kate Colvin wants 16,000 extra homes and units to be built around the country.
We've heard a lot of well-meaning rhetoric, and the draft plan certainly includes housing as a focus area, but it doesn't include any deliverables, and the last budget didn't include any new funding for housing.
As well as more ambitious targets. Full Stop Australia CEO Hayley Foster says the plan needs more money.
We understand that it is a tight fiscal environment at the moment, but we do know that the cost socially and economically of domestic, family and sexual violence, and so it is a very smart place to invest at this point in time. Without a significant investment in the order of $1 billion per annum federally and matching commitments from the states and territories, we're not really going to see the rubber hit the road and reach those targets.
The document is already overdue, and advocates say they want it finished as soon as possible.
Isabel Rowe. And if you or anyone you know needs help, call 1-800-RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732. If it's an emergency, call 000.